Hello everybody, very special video today. Today is a video that is an interview that I had with the wonderful Nick Catford. Now, Nick Catford will explain his journey and his story and his explores, so stay tuned after this. But I just thought I'd sort of preface this by saying how special and wonderful this was to do, how excited I was to do it, and to be honest with you, somebody who's probably one of the most important people that we have in the historical exploring landscape and documentation, more importantly, as well. If some of you don't know, he's responsible for Subterranea Britannica, which is a massive, important site that people who explore use, mostly for ROC posts and underground structures. So, stay tuned. Really hope you enjoy this interview with Nick Catford. So, yeah, let's go and talk to the man himself. Come on. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Dan.
So I would like to go straight into it if possible. So Please tell me about yourself and what your role has been and why we're here, really. What I need to talk about.
Back in the early 1970s, about 72, 73, I was speaking to my dad one day, and he was talking about what he used to do as a young boy, and he used to love playing in his local mines. And he said you could get lost in these mines. They were in Godstone, in Surrey, near where he lived. And I thought, oh, that sounds very interesting. I wonder if they're still there. And he said he remembered, and we're going back now to the 1920s, so it was a long time since he'd been in there. I said, can you show me? And he said, yes, of course I will. And we drove down there. It's close to the M25, and we walked up this footpath, and he went straight there, and there was the entrance to one of the Godstone mines. And you had to clamber in. It had obviously been, the entrance had been filled at some point, but someone had dug in. So we weren't prepared. We had a torch each. I think it was my mum as well. I think the two of them came along, and we lowered ourselves carefully into this hole. He had said you can get totally lost, so we took a roll of fishing line because you can unravel that as you go along, and we explored, and it just went on forever. It was unbelievable. You couldn't stand upright in many places, so quite some of it was crawling. But it just so intrigued me, and I knew it was something I wanted to do more of. I think we were in there for about 4 hours, and eventually we followed our fishing line back, gathering it in as we came back. And as we were walking back to the car, I met another bunch of people coming up the footpath towards the mine. They had cavers' helmets on, so it was clear where they were going. So we talked to them, and they said that they were from a group called Subterranea Britannica. And they said, if you want to explore the mines, you would be well advised to join either Subterranea Britannica or the local caving club, which at the time was Unit 2 Cave Research and Exploration, and they will be able to help you. So I did. I joined both of them, and that really opened up a new experience for me. From then, I was going underground as often as I could, and it wasn't. I started on mines. I already had other interests. I was interested in railways, so railway tunnels quickly came into it, and then my interest diversified into military sites. Initially, World War II or earlier, so Palmerston forts. World War II bunkers, And then in about 1984, I was contacted by a friend who was particularly interested in sites of the Cold War, and he had discovered a Cold War bunker at Wartling in Sussex, and he suggested that we go and have a look at that. So we did that. So then the Cold War came into it, everything. My father was a member of the Royal Observer Corps. He during the war, he was a rear gunner in Lancasters, but he loved his time in the military. So when he came out of the services, he joined the Royal Observer Corps in 1965. So I went to his post, so I knew about Royal Observer Corps posts, so I took an interest in those. And it's really just developed from there. Anything underground, to me, has a fascination. To be honest, it doesn't have to be underground at all. Anything. I like derelict factories. Yeah. I've thoroughly enjoyed exploring derelict hospitals. And they've all got service tunnels, so there's an underground element to those. So if it's abandoned and it's underground, so much the better. But if it's not underground, factories, I love them. I just love exploring. I love the history. To me, it's important to find out about the place. I have no interest whatsoever in exploring for the sake of exploring. I want to know what the place was, what it did, who worked there. So having explored, I might not know anything when I explore somewhere, but then I will look up the records. That can involve going to record offices and reading up about a place. Obviously now we've got the internet, and so much information is available on the internet, which is superb. So I don't have to go to record offices anymore because it's all online. I love maps. I've been collecting maps. Well, my father gave me his collection of Ordnance Survey maps. I've now been collecting maps since the 1980s. And I've got a huge collection, 5,000 folding Ordnance Survey maps, lots of flat sheets. And of course, that's all available online as well now, so you don't actually have to collect them.
Did you know the Scottish Library one?
Aren't they superb?
I know, yeah. I was going to say, because I did that comparison.
Yes.
You do that, yeah.
And of course, there's no copyright on Ordnance Survey map. Well, there is 50 years, and it's the ones older than 50 years are the ones that are of interest.
I use those when I'm doing my history lessons. I use the old maps from the Scottish Library. Because of that, I literally find where I'm at. It's so easy to do, and then I'm like, oh, that's...
And you can just copy them easily. Okay, I don't know if there's a copyright issue with copying them, but they don't put any watermarks on them, so...
Maps, I mean,
But Ordnance Survey, I can republish an Ordnance Survey map, and I don't have to even say copyright Ordnance Survey, because it's not. There is no copyright.
So what was the history? Because you mentioned obviously that Subterranean Britannica. You've met Subterranean Britannica before.
Yes,
What was their association with you, and how did you sort of merge into that then?
I became quite heavily involved very quickly with Subbrit because they were my sort of people.
Were there many members to begin with?
I think there were about 800 members in those days, but it was within. It was probably literally weeks I joined the committee.
Really?
So I was involved in the organisation of site visits, and eventually I became editor of their magazine, of which I'm still editor of the magazine, which I love doing. But to me, the other important thing is I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
I got my first camera in 1962. It was one book of Green Shield stamps. Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, you know what? It's strangely done.
Yeah, it's trading stamps that you collect when you go shopping. And so I got my first camera in 1962. So I've been taking photographs since then. And then I started taking pictures of industrial archaeological subjects in about 1968, starting off with disused stations. And then everything else followed from then. So I developed techniques for taking photographs underground. I went to college. I got an A-level in photography, and then I got a City and Guilds in photography. And I ended up giving a lecture at Twickenham Tech on how to photograph underground sites.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I showed them everything I'd done. And we're going back into the, I suppose, 80s, early 80s here. And they wanted me to talk to the class about how to take photographs underground.
So how long had Subbrit been going before you'd come on board then?
I think it started in 72.
Okay.
Wow. It was started by Sylvia Beeman, who had been on the Aldermaston marches. She was a band bomber. Oh, wow. But she had a fascination on things underground. Yeah. And her speciality was speleotherapy. Okay. She was interested in healing underground. And she founded Subterranea Britannica, and I came in not too long after she founded it. And and her other interest was ice houses. So she wrote the Bible on ice houses. And I just got heavily involved so quickly with the organisation. And so I'm not on the committee anymore, but I'm still editor of the magazine, which I do 3 times a year. And I think I do a good job. It's a glossy magazine, 80 odd pages, full of photographs. I'm not a computer person, but I'm very good at photo manipulation on computers. So I might not be able to program things, but I can process pictures and improve pictures. So one of my jobs as editor is to look at all the pictures as they come in and make them as good as I can for publication in the magazine. It's great fun.
Yeah, I bet it's really good. So I'd like to get into nitty-gritty now about you, more importantly. So what was your most favourite explore and why? I know when we talk about favourite, it can mean many different things, but favourite in certain aspects. But what was your most memorable one that you've ever done, or favourite one that you've always looked back on and sort of thought that was really good?
There are 2. Okay. Can I mention them both?
Yeah, of course you can, yeah.
At a very early age, in the 60s, yeah, I was interested in disused stations. Yeah. And, of course, quite a lot of disused stations are underground. Disused tube stations were top of my list to visit. And the hardest one was Brompton Road. Okay. There is a street-level building which was owned by the Ministry of Defence because it was used during the war. Mm-hmm. And the only way that you can now get into Brompton Road is by walking along the track. We got into quite a lot of tube stations where you can get in from the road and always with permission. Mm-hmm. Well, not always with permission. I'll tell you about Wood Lane in a minute. But Brompton Road was always a hard one. But we contacted the station supervisor at South Kensington. You never go in at the top, so don't go to the public relations office. Oh, okay. Go in at station level, station supervisor level, yep, because every closed station is looked after by generally the closest open station to it. Oh,
Oh, I did not.
and they will have the keys. So we contacted the station supervisor at South Kensington.
Yeah.
When I say we, I should say someone who works for TfL. But I was invited on the trip because I really wanted to go to Brompton Road. The only way you can do it is after the service is finished. So we all had to be at South Kensington Station for about 1 a.m. So there were 10 of us there, all working for TfL apart from me. But I had the appropriate orange clothes, so no one would have known. And there had to be a person who was familiar with the track, so they sent someone down from Highbury who seemed to know nothing at all about it. And she said to the group, "Does anyone know where we're going?" And I said, "Well, yes, I know." And nobody else knew. He said, "Right, you can lead then." So the only person who didn't work for TfL was leading the party.
Wow.
So they had a bit of equipment to check that the current was off. Basically, they put it across the two rails and it was off. So we jumped down onto the track and we were walking along the track and Brompton Road, they've walled off the platform so that they could use the platform area during the war. It was being used as an anti-aircraft operations room. It was built into the abandoned lift shaft. They put several floors in the lift shaft, and they had operations rooms, 4 of them in the lift shaft, different levels, and another one on the platform. There is a little bit of platform that's left open at the end of the brick wall. So we climbed up onto the station, onto the platform. One of my colleagues had a set of London Transport keys. So although she didn't have the keys, we had the keys, and she was fine with that. So we could open up all the doors to the MOD sections, because at that time, a lot of it was still owned by the MOD. So we spent a lot of time exploring the station. It was the place I really wanted to go to. You could get into the operations rooms. All the ventilation equipment that had been put in by the Ministry of Defence during the war was all still in place. There was a map still in place on one of the walls showing all the anti-aircraft sites. The only reason they hadn't taken it out is because it was glued to the wall and there was no way of getting it out without taking the wall down.
Amazing.
So the map is still there today.
Wow.
And it everything, all the gun sites were marked on the map. And it was just such an experience being in what was such an important place. It was one of the main anti-aircraft operations rooms for London during the war.
Did it feel like a time capsule?
Yes,
Yeah.
it did. And it's all still there now.
Wow.
The site's been sold now. It's been sold to a Ukrainian oligarch.
Okay.
He's done nothing with it. The building, as far as I know, is still there unaltered. Before it was sold to him, we did manage to get in again, but this time via the MOD. The MOD have actually, of the government agencies, they are the most helpful. They tend to ignore health and safety because their soldiers ignore a lot of health and safety. And when we were invited back there, a properly arranged visit by Subbrit, there was somebody there to greet us. They gave us the keys, said lock up and put them through the letterbox when you go, and they left us to it. So that's 2 visits to Brompton Road. As I said, we've visited a lot of tube stations. The one where I didn't have permission, but it was wide open, and I've got no problem in going into somewhere that's wide open is Wood Lane.
Yeah.
Now, Wood Lane was part surface and part underground on the Central Line at White City. And the surface platforms, the way onto them was through an entrance, an obvious entrance on Wood Lane, but there's a road just past the entrance on the right, and they'd knocked the wall down for rebuilding. So it was just possible to walk straight in. So I did that. You could go down into the subway and onto the underground platforms. The line was still in use as a line serving a depot. So there were tube trains going backwards and forwards. And I found that some of the workers used to walk to work at the depot the same way as I went in. So they'd go through the hole in the wall, down the stairs. So I got speaking to quite a few of them. And
were you in high vis as well?
Yes. I was in high vis, and they knew I shouldn't be there, but they didn't care. And I arranged to send photographs to them. So it was such a fascinating station. The signs were all still there. It still said Wood Lane, the London Transport Roundel. They were all still there. All the posters were still on the walls from the 1940s. The other line was there were two underground platforms. One was on the loop line to the depot, and one was on a through line that was still operational. So you had to be a little bit careful there because there were Central Line trains passing every few minutes. Yeah. So you took the picture and then stood back, because there's nothing worse than taking pictures with flash as a train's coming.
I was literally going to say, imagine if the train drivers go through there and they see a flash all of a sudden or whatever.
We were always warned about that when we went to disused stations legally. Don't take any pictures when there's a train coming. So you never do, because you don't want any complaints. You don't want to be kicked out. And we have been kicked out once when we had permission. Okay. Yeah, that was unfortunate. That was at Holborn. Okay. And Holborn is...
well-known one, isn't it, actually, really?
Pardon?
Holborn's quite a well-known one.
Yes, Holborn was the start of the Aldwych branch. Yeah. So there was a platforms at Holborn, and then the line went off. Yeah. There was disused platform at Holborn, then the line went off to Aldwych. And we went there with permission. We had the keys. We let ourselves in. We always knew the right people to ask, so they didn't have to escort us. They just give us the keys to these places, and that used to happen all the time. So we let ourselves in, and we were down on the platform at Holborn, and I could see torches down the tunnel towards Aldwych. And we thought, that's odd. We thought we'd better wait and see who they are. So we waited on the platform at Holborn, and they got closer and closer and closer together. And it was London Transport Police. And they said they'd been called out because there was a report of some activity at Aldwych. So they'd walked down the tunnel to Aldwych, found nothing, came back, said, what are you doing here? How did you get there? I said, well, we've got the key. We're here legally. And we got in so low to get permission, nobody knew at all. Heads did roll because we shouldn't really have been given the keys, but we had. So we didn't get into any trouble. But the police said, you've got to give me the film. I said, no, you've got to delete your images. And I said, well, I've got nothing to delete. It's film. They said, we've got to give me the film. I said, no. But they didn't have the power to take it from me. No. They said, well, you must give me your word you won't publish. I said, yeah, of course I'll give you my word I won't publish. Crossed fingers. And eventually they just left us to it, because we were doing absolutely nothing wrong. We had the right to be there. we had the keys to the place, so they just let us get on with it that day and disappeared. But the person who arranged the permission did get in trouble later, which was unfortunate. He was a main signalman at Coburg Street, and he was told, if you do this again, you'll lose your job. But he retired. He's dead now anyway. So, but that actually put paid to a lot of our visits to disused tube stations, because he arranged a lot of them quite legitimately. But we'd done 80%. I haven't done them all yet. There are still some I'd like to do, like City Road. And City Road is one where you'd have to, not City Road, British Museum, where you'd have to walk along the track. I've been to City Road. Yeah. British Museum, you'd have to walk along the track from Holborn, because the shaft, the lift shaft has been filled, and the surface building has been demolished. So the only way is by walking along the track from Holborn. So that's still one I'd like to do. Most of the ones I really wanted to do, like King William Street, which was the original terminus of the City and South London Railway.
I was going to say that's another quite well-known, famous.
Yes, one, very easy access, but you've got to have permission. And we knew the right people. A member of, this was a different organiser, but a member of Subbrit is quite important in London transport, and he was allowed to lead parties of people because he was trusted. Therefore, if he trusted us, then they trusted him. And we've had I didn't go on it, but we've had another trip to Brompton Road with him, where we had three separate trips on the same day. And in fact, last year we went to Aldwych with him. Now, the London Transport Museum, I think, charge about, I don't know, it's £40 or £80 for trips to Aldwych. We had a load of free ones last year, because he is still doing that for us, and he still has the authority to do it. So again, everything is done legitimately. It is so much easier if you do things the right way. Yeah. If you make a reasonable request for access to somewhere, generally you get a reasonable response. But it helps if you know the right people, which we do.
So it would be Wood Lane and the two underground stations would probably be your most favourite ones
in England.
Yeah, of course. I was going to ask you, actually, we might come back to that, but it was, obviously, I know you from obviously Subbrit and the fact of your photos and obviously your main contributions on that site, really. But you talk about obviously photography as being the main thing. I mean, is that really your ideal method to document and obviously, putting out the information via that, really? Is it,
because I developed ways of lighting vast areas very early on in the 80s. It's not just a matter of putting a flash on the camera and taking the picture, because the flash isn't going to carry any distance. But I developed ways of lighting, say, 200 feet of passage evenly along the whole length of it without me being in the picture, which was the important thing. I didn't want lots of me's and silhouettes standing in the picture. And that's what I was talking about when I gave the talk at college. So because I could do it, because I could take photographs underground, that quickly became the most important thing to me. So everywhere I went, I would take pictures. I had a go at video in the early days with the video cameras were not quite as we have now. I had a handheld pneumatic camera,
Yeah.
which is huge. I had a kilowatt of lighting, which went nowhere.
Yeah.
I did some video, but it was just so expensive. Well, I started off with 16 mil, and so cine film, and that was prohibitively expensive. So video was cheaper, but it was just so bulky. The portable recorder weighed a ton. When you've got to crawl through the mud.
I was going to say it must detract from experience for me, the experience of actually trying to,
Yes.
everything to think about when
you've got to keep everything meticulously clean. And for me, video didn't work.
No.
Now I do a lot of video, strangely enough, just with my phone. And a lot of it goes on YouTube, and it's so much easier now. But when I was doing a lot of the underground visiting, it just wasn't a possibility. So I stuck to film. It was always negative because I had my own darkroom, so I could process everything myself. I printed all the prints myself. When I did slides, I could process the slides myself. Until I went to college, and then we had a lab there, and I gave the technician there £1 to film, and he'd do it for me. So that just saved a lot of time. But what has been important to me is a lot of people take pictures, they send them off to the chemist to have them processed, they get the pictures back, they keep the pictures and throw away the negatives. Nobody keeps the negatives. I put the negatives in a file. They go back to 1966, still in the file. They're all labelled. So although the prints might be gone, and I didn't print a lot of them, but I still have my negatives going back to 1966, and I can look them up. And now you've got the ability to scan them so easily and publish them on websites, on social media, on YouTube. I was no lover of social media when it came along. I wasn't interested in Facebook until I realised that Facebook has specialist groups, and specialist groups are full of people with specialist knowledge and lots of photos. And if they're local history groups, there are photos there that aren't seen in museums anywhere because it's out of people's personal life story. So I got heavily involved with Facebook groups, and it was just another outlet for all the pictures that I'd taken over the years.
Honestly, yeah, fascinating. Really, I was going to ask you probably one of the most important questions I think that what I always wanted to know, especially from your enthusiasm and where you came from, is there anything that you ever wanted to do but couldn't, or in terms of, is there something that's not there anymore that you wish you'd gone to, or are there places that, obviously as you mentioned before, underground stations, are there places that you would like to go to that exist that you've always wanted to have the opportunity to go to?
Well, I can honestly say no.
Really?
There are places I haven't been to.
Yeah.
But one of the most important sites was, have you heard of Burlington?
Oh yeah.
That was the central government headquarters during the war, and I always wanted to. Well, there was no one admitted it existed, and that was always on my bucket list. That was a place I really wanted to go. So I thought, well, things are gradually opening up. So I wrote to the CO because it's still an active site, and I wrote to the CO at Corsham, who'd heard of me, so that was helpful. And his mine manager because the underground facilities there still have a mine manager.
It's huge, isn't it? I mean,
It's huge. It was initially a quarry, underground quarry, and then it was taken over as the war headquarters. And the mine manager had publicly said, "I will never have Nick Catford in my site." And the CO at Corsham instructed him to take me round.
Oh, wow.
And he turned out to be a very nice guy. Once we got talking, so I had a day there with him, driving round in a...
I was going to ask you, did you, because you couldn't walk around there.
Oh, no, much too big.
You must have had like...
No, we had an electric buggy.
Yeah.
And there was no limits at all about where we could go, what I could photograph, and they couldn't have been more helpful.
Yeah.
You must have seen the pictures of the underground telephone exchange there.
Oh, huge! And they've still got the I keep forgetting what they're called, the things that they suck up, don't they? Like air.
Yes. The Lamson tube.
That's it. Thank you very much. Yeah,
that's all still there.
Yeah.
But when I went, everything was still on. The fans were on.
Oh, really?
It was all lit, and it was in beautiful condition. And I spent the whole day there with Andy, the mine manager, who he denied ever having said that he would never have me in his mine. But there was no limitation to publication, so they were fine about everything. So I had the one trip, just me. I couldn't take anyone else. But I did manage to arrange a second trip about a year later for three of us. So it wasn't the mine manager, it was his assistant this time. So we had another trip there, doing all the things, because it is so vast, you only did really a fraction of it in a day. So we did a lot of the things we hadn't done the first time. And it's the place where they had commandeered escalators from the underground.
That's right. And put them. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we were able to walk up and down those escalators.
Does it still have the logo or the badge from the escalators?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I remember. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
And it was a second wonderful trip. This time we were there all day, but he didn't. The deputy manager wanted to go for lunch, so he just left us to it. He said, "Well, don't wander too far. I'll be about an hour."
You could actually get lost, couldn't you?
You could get totally lost. But it was all lit. So, and as far as I know, the CCTV was still working then.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my word.
Because they were actually using a few of the rooms underground.
Oh, what's still active?
Still active, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not for anything sinister, just as offices.
Oh, wow.
So they were the lift was still active. So they left us there for an hour. We in roughly the same place when they came back. So that was two really successful trips. And then, a lot more recently, Subbrit got a trip there, which was a trip for 30 people. They started opening up more, and some specialist groups got in. Normally, those that were associated with the military, it was a lot easier for them to get in. But then they turned the power off, and the place started to rot.
Ooh.
The telephone exchange now is so sad. Everything has rotted away. Eventually, they decided something has got to be done to stop the rot. So they got contractors in, and they have improved it, but now they won't let anyone in at all.
Because I mean, it must have affected the kitchens as well.
In the kitchens, all the equipment was there, all in pristine condition.
I was going to say, did they steal from memory? Obviously just memory from my own documentation. I'm just reading into it. Was they still had like literal bags of not bags, like boxes of pens and pencils.
Oh yeah,
stationery
in the stores.
But literally, that's it. Yeah.
In the stores they had so much stuff brand new,
Wow.
And it was just all piled up in cupboards.
Yeah, crazy.
But now they wouldn't even let us use any of the work when it rotted away.
Yeah.
There were some published pictures in an MOD magazine. They wouldn't even let us use those in Subbrit. So we quite cheekily contacted the contractors who did the work for them.
Right.
They'd taken a load of pictures. They gave us permission to use their pictures.
Oh, brilliant.
So the MOD must have been livid.
Good little turnaround.
Yeah. Because it was done quite legitimately.
Yeah.
We asked, we got, and they said yes. I must tell you, I've told you about the places I went to in this country.
Yes.
I must mention Europe.
Yes, of course.
At a Subbrit meeting in 2000, a chap called Mike Barton came to the meeting. He was a Subbrit member, and he had worked for the MOD as a translator in Germany. So he was a fluent Russian speaker as well as a fluent German speaker. So he was a translator, and he was particularly interested in Cold War sites in East Germany. And he had a lot of excellent contacts. So he arranged a 10-day coach tour of some of the best East German Cold War bunkers. And one of these was probably the best bunker I've ever been into. It was the East German government underground bunker for Erich Honecker, who was the East German president at that time. It was a 3-level bunker on springs within a bunker. So the idea was that it would withstand a nearby nuclear detonation. Yeah. It would shake, but it wouldn't be severely damaged.
Quite advanced for the time.
Quite advanced,
like in Asia, when they now build the foundation on earthquake place, they do build the concrete. Everything else has to be like that. But
so when we went in there, all his trips, all his site visits were arranged with permission, but quite often we had to break in. But we were breaking in with permission.
Yeah, weird.
which is fine. So we might take sort of Kangos along, or generators, but it was all done legitimately. So we went into what's known as Honecker's bunker, just outside Berlin. There's a surface block, which was the accommodation block where Honecker had a flat, and then from the basement a tunnel led probably about 100 yards to the bunker. So we went in through the basement of the block, along the tunnel and into the bunker. And when you climbed into the area where the bunker is suspended and saw the size of the springs that were holding the bunker, sort of 40-foot springs, lines of them, it was such an amazing place, and everything was still there. All the equipment was still there.
Like a time capsule.
Yeah, in the kitchens, the chef's outfit was still hanging up on a hook.
It's like a film set.
It was like a film set.
Yeah.
And we had a day there, and I had to go back several more times because you couldn't see it in a day.
Wow.
You would really want a week there because it was such a massive place. But that is my ultimate explore abroad.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of great places in East Germany.
Did it make it because of it being such a surprise as well? And like, you know, when people talk about things, until you actually visit it for yourself and you see it, it's kind of like
very
it
much
makes
so.
it that way.
Yeah. We weren't the first in there. I think Mike Barton was the first in there because he wasn't quite so concerned about getting permission in his early days. So this tunnel from the accommodation block was blocked. So he and the party went there with road drills and a massive generator, and they went through probably 3 feet of reinforced concrete, and it took them several days, and they got into it. But by the time we got in it, everyone liked him, so it was all legitimate by that time. But it was just amazing to see. We visited World War II sites, Cold War sites, Colditz Castle. It was just such a variety of different sites. One of our guides was a former member of the Stasi. And we had all the right people. We picked up on the way a Stasi commander and took him back to his bunker. And a few years later, when he died, we were reading his obituary in the paper. We saw what a nasty guy he was, but he was perfectly nice when we saw him.
Yeah, well, you know.
But times change.
Times change, absolutely.
But the Stasi guy who was our guide to a lot of the places, lovely guy, delightful guy.
I mean, you must be, it's obviously difficult to rate your work, but I mean, you must be proud when, like, even someone like me comes along and just is so enamoured with what
I am.
Do.
And I do love talking about things, and I do talk quite a lot. So
well, it's all good for me.
So that's not a problem. But I've had a great life. I've got great memories. I like to think I went around doing things the right way.
Yeah.
To me, that was important. As I said, never had a problem with just going in if it's open.
No.
But if you make a reasonable request, you get a reasonable response for access. Yeah. There's only one place we didn't, and that was a rota site in Buckinghamshire. And we were told, no, you can't go on the land, rough ground. So I said, what do you mean by rough ground? He said, rabbit burrows, you might put a foot in one. But then we just asked someone else, and he said, well, if you put a foot in one, you'll hurt your foot. So it really is a lot of the time just asking the right person. And if you get a bad response, ask someone else. So the next time, they just help yourself, they said.
Yeah. No, it's just such as I sort of say, like, you know, to meet you and to sort of be in your presence is just a wealth of knowledge. And to be honest with you, we spoke, obviously, you're so inspirational on my sort of like outlook on it as well. And it's nice to sort of meet someone who's got exactly the same mindset towards how to document and how to visit and how to be respectful, you know, and I think it's most important. As a final question, what are your future plans now with everything involving Subbrit and really for you, more importantly for historical documentation? You know, are things changing for you? Are things, you know?
Yes, I'm getting older. I'm still editing the magazine, Subterranea, and I have no intention of stopping unless the magazine goes digital. Mm-hmm. And I've said to the committee, I'm not interested in editing a digital magazine. Right. I think it should remain as a paper publication. But every year at the AGM, there is a vote. Do you want to go digital? And the largest number who have ever wanted to go digital has been 7%. Really? So right, the membership want to stay as a paper publication. As long as that's what the members want, I will continue doing that.
Yeah.
As far as going underground is concerned, I don't go underground a lot now. I said I'm not as fit as I used to be. I still take a lot of photographs, but I have a lot of other things that I'm involved with. I video and photograph bands, and I do that every week. So I'm doing more of that. So the underground exploration is limited a lot more. So I don't do a lot of that. I still occasionally go underground. So as far as the future is concerned, it's really just carrying on producing the magazine and doing the best job I can with Subterranea. And I think every issue is they're just getting better. So
I think honestly, Nick, from the bottom of my heart, and I really mean this, as you well know, like I'm a huge fan of yours anyway, and obviously for the fact that on the website every documentation is mostly yours, aren't they?
Yes.
The photos that you see are mostly yours, and everything else. And I mean, you know, for me, I got into Subterranean Britannica mostly for the ROC post to begin with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As a form, because
well, I visited all 1,563 of them.
So that is the fact
Every single one I have visited, even if I didn't know, or even if I did know that it had gone, and it was a £30 ferry ride to go and see that it had gone, I still paid that £30 and went to confirm that it had gone.
Amazing.
I had to go. The only one I couldn't get in, that annoyed me, was Windsor Castle.
Oh, really?
I did get a reply from the castle, and they explained that there was nothing to see after the fire. The room had been totally renovated and put to other uses. But we did find a member of the ROC who was at that post, and he'd taken a load of pictures.
Oh, okay.
So I have got pictures of it, but that's the only one where they refused me permission to go into it. But I did try.
I just think that from a legacy perspective, I really hope that you know the lasting impact on that. And I've spoken to a few historical explorers who have used Subterranean Britannica's site as reference, and obviously because you're such an integral part of that, because of your photos and your documentation on it, like I said, on a personal note, for me it's been huge to sort of like use your guidance.
Thank you.
As that, and I can safely say on behalf of other people who are probably going to watch this video and other people that you have made a bigger impact on the younger generation. I say I'm not younger myself, but you know, a younger.
It worries me that young people have no interest in history. And as we talked about earlier, all they're interested in doing is social media, taking selfies of themselves, and they have no hobbies.
No, absolutely.
They have no hobbies. And I've always had hobbies, and I couldn't. And the hobbies now have overtaken my life. And I just can't understand. You know, you hear so much about all the troubles and people committing suicide. Get yourself a hobby.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Get an interest. Do something. There is so many things you could do, but
and I mean, and honestly, it's just so refreshing of like talking to you, knowing how many things we've got in common, and even your beliefs on that as well. I mean, it's fascinating that it's a validation really for me. More importantly, that there are certain mindsets that really apply and they do work. You know what I mean? And the fact that getting outdoors, as I've always said, is so important anyway. And if you've got a reason to go outdoors, i.e. to explore something, do it. You know, but you find more enjoyment out of it by finding history of it as well by doing that. And I think it's like I said, it's integral to what you do. So the final thing I was going to ask you was, is there anything you'd like to sort of like put down for the links down below? Obviously, I'll put down the Subbrit site anyway in the link below for the videos. But is there anything else you'd like for me to put down at all, or are you quite happy about that?
No, I'm happy with that. Cool. My other interests are totally different to that, so there's no point in even mentioning them.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention whilst we were here to record, or is that quite happy about that?
I would like to show you the rail.
Yes. So
can you
pause it?
Can
we'll
you
come back.
Well, can you pass it to me?
Yeah. Okay. This.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, blimey! Oh wow! It's heavy. You okay?
Right.
Oh, let's have a look. Yeah.
when I first visited the Godstone mines, the first thing I noticed was that rails were still in place. And they weren't conventional rails as we know them. At that time, there were plateways. The first plateway was the Surrey Iron Railway, which was extended by the Croydon, Merstham and Godstone Railway. When that closed around about 1800, the rails were torn up and they were relaid in the Godstone mines. And what I found was it's very heavy. One of those old Croydon, Merstham and Godstone plates, still in place. It was buried in a heap of mud. I just saw the end of it sticking out, and I thought, you can see the little hole there. That's where it was bolted down to the stone blocks, and they are heavy. There, well, you just lifted it up, so I had to drag that 500 yards out of the mine.
Wow.
It's fully recorded that I've got it. It's not as if I've stolen it from the mine. The Wealdon Cave and Mine Society, who administer the mines now, they know I've got it. They cleaned it up and painted it. So I keep it on display here as a reminder of my early days of mine exploration. And there were quite a lot of them around, but there was a display at Merstham Station of them, and someone stolen them all because they were out on the surface. But thank goodness there are still a lot of them in place in the mine at Godstone.
Stories that could tell.
Indeed.
Even the story that it's got out. I mean, I'm impressed that I could not. That is, for the record, that is very, very I was quite surprised.
I had it under one arm as I carried it out.
No way.
But you have to, a lot of the coming out of the mine, you're crawling.
Of course.
Because you're not standing upright anywhere. So.
And the light might have been a little bit, I'm assuming, I mean, like, I always used to moan about it on my channel that, you know, when I was younger, especially torches, where light isn't what it is, you know, with LEDs.
Well, we had a miner's helmet.
Yeah.
So, well, when I first visited, we just had a torch.
Yeah. Because I remember that from when I first started. We spoke about, obviously, like, you know, I've been doing this for exploring properly for about over 20 years now. But I remember my first memories were of just using normal torches.
Yeah, that's all we had, normal torches.
It only changed when I started to record because I realised how weak they were. When you like, as you know, like if you're filming something and you've got a torch, which would be fine just to explore with.
Yeah.
To actually film and to illuminate, like a tunnel, for example, it's not going to be.
No.
You know, you need something a lot brighter. So yeah.
But then we started getting brighter torches, LED torches, and now you need such low levels of light to do the filming. You could actually use an ordinary torch and get reasonable results now. The modern cameras are so much better. The way my photography has changed, I can now use a very bright and powerful light just at the camera position and just shine it down a tunnel, keeping it moving. You keep it moving all the time, so you don't get any hot spots of light, and you can light 200 feet of tunnel from the camera very adequately with just a modern light, and it's just so much quicker now. Yeah. I can remember one picture in some underground quarries in Dudley took me an hour to light because it was so big on so many different levels. So the camera would be set up with an open shutter, and there had to be someone by the camera. So I would take flash from various positions behind the camera, and then I would say to my friend, cover up, and he held a bit of cardboard in front of the lens, so I could then put my torch on, move to another position,
Okay,
uncover,
yeah.
flash again, cover up, and I'd be moving around the chamber into all sorts of concealed positions. And there must have been about 200 different flash positions to light this chamber. And when I saw the result, it was so evenly lit. It was unbelievable. You'd think it was almost daylight. Now you just don't have to do that. It is so much easier. I like to think in those days, people couldn't properly light underground places. Now anyone can do it. And I've got no problem with that, because more places are getting recorded. Unfortunately, they're not recorded always by the right people. They're people who like to get a silhouette of themselves with their arms in the air and photograph all sorts of garbage sitting on the floor. So there are lots of people who know how to take a good photograph, but they've got no interest in the places they're actually photographing.
It's not justifying the historical importance of the relevance behind it, which is just as important. It needs to be matched with it, I believe. Obviously, we've spoken about it before. So. Nick, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
That's my pleasure, Dan.
Honestly, I know that this is just a basic interview that we've had, but really, I'm truly just so grateful just to meet you in person. And just to be such an inspiration on me, and hopefully this video can also inspire people just to keep going out there, keep documenting in the appropriate way of historical documentation, and just to inspire, really, isn't it? You know what I mean? And I think that it's amazing that even though we talk about so many familiar things, and one other thing I just wanted to mention at the end of it, which hopefully you'll agree with, which we have agreed with before pre-filming, which was the importance of the size of the location. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. If it's just a cellar of a house, or a private air raid shelter in a garden, or a massive nuclear bunker, they are all important. And I'm not necessarily saying they're as important, but they are important, and they are all part of the same story. And if someone wants their little air raid shelter in their garden explored, I'm quite happy to go up there and explore it. We did one very recently for a delightful lady in Colchester who was very interested in the history, and she did a lot of the research. And it was just nice to work with her. So we wrote that up in the last issue of the magazine, and I'm just as happy to do that as a big bunker or a mine. The mines were my first interest, but I guess the bunkers tended to take over from the mines, because people have always been able to explore mines. Cold War bunkers are something that weren't available while the Cold War was still on.
And it's what we spoke about. We spoke about this as well, about air raid shelters, was the fact that, especially in my channel now, like the fact that I've got the opportunity to document something that hasn't been documented, same with the Colchester one, is that they're unique.
Yes.
They are small, they're unique, and it's a pleasure that you get those opportunities to sort of do that. And again, coming from you being an inspiration on what I do with that, is that it's not about size, it's about the importance of what that represents, and the fact that even on air raid shelters, they can be small, but the significance of the use and the importance of why they were there in the first place, and they're mostly all different, and they're just as relevant now than they were even back when they were built, because of just the historical timeline that presents, the fact they're still there.
With the ROC post, there were 1,563 of them. They're all but virtually exactly the same. They're tiny. They're three-man rooms. But I was interested enough to buy one, so I own one. It is being slowly restored. And I'm glad to see quite a lot of them are restored and open to the public now. A lot of them are gone. Not many are totally gone. If you demolish one, you knock the top bit down into the shaft and earth it over, and the room will still be there. Because it costs a lot more to dig it out than to just fill it in. So most are still there. We did get one very kind farmer. He had no idea that he had it in his field. So I said, this is where it was. I gave him my phone number, and 3 weeks later, he phoned me up, said, "Do you want to come back? You can see the bunker now." He'd got his JCB out, and he dug it all open for me.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, that was an Enfield ROC post.
There you go. Nick, thank you. Honestly, pleasure as always. I'll shake your hand because honestly, thank you so much for that.
Can you take this back off me?
Of course, yeah, I'll take that back. Thank you. Let's say this. Oh wow.
Oh.
Exercise in itself, isn't it? Oh, amazing. Well, everybody, that was the wonderful Nick Catford. I really hope you enjoyed that video. Thank you so much for staying along with me right till the end. Just literally one of the most important people that we can have when it comes to historical exploration and documentation, with his photos, his extensive knowledge on these sort of like structures and subject matters, really. I really hope, more importantly, like I said, that you enjoyed that video. And a massive thanks to Nick to allow me the opportunity to literally meet someone who has been such a huge inspiration on my channel, really, more importantly, to turn it into something that provides a form of documentation. Yeah, thank you. A bit speechless really when all this sort of stuff comes about, but yeah, honestly, true experience. In immortal words of Phoenix history, because history matters and it just does. Thank you so much to Nick Catford for this wonderful opportunity in this interview. Take care, everybody, and I'll see y'all very soon. Ready? Kapow.